In January 2024, a federal judge blocked Spirit Airlines' last-ditch $3.8 billion merger, Lifeline, triggering a 53% stock crash and erasing the safety net Spirit needed to survive. Just months later, a microscopic defect inside Pratt & Whitney jet engines forced Spirit to ground 1 in 5 planes for months on end. This wasn't just a business setback. It triggered America's largest airline bankruptcy in over a decade, not once, but twice. How did a single engine defect, compounded by a vanished merger escape route, push an entire airline to the brink of extinction? The answer begins with a decision that changed everything. In February 2022, Spirit Airlines found itself at the center of a bidding war. Frontier Airlines, another ultra-low-cost carrier, offered $2.8 billion to merge, promising a combined giant in the budget travel market. But JetBlue Airways soon countered with a $3.8 billion all-cash offer, over $1 billion more than Frontier's proposal. Spirit's board, wary of antitrust hurdles and regulatory scrutiny, recommended the lower-risk Frontier deal. Yet the numbers were hard to ignore. JetBlue's bid valued Spirit shares at a significant premium, and for investors, the prospect of an immediate payout outweighed the uncertainties of a stock-based merger. Shareholders made their voices clear in July 2022, voting to reject the Frontier deal and approve JetBlue's higher offer. Proxy filings show that nearly 80% favored the JetBlue buyout, despite warnings about the likelihood of government intervention. For Spirit's largest investors, mutual funds, pension managers, and hedge funds, the logic was straightforward. Take the money now or risk a drawn-out integration with Frontier that might not deliver on its promises. Analysts at the time called it a classic gamble, choosing the highest price on the table, even as the Department of Justice had already begun raising concerns about market concentration and consumer harm. JetBlue, for its part, agreed to pay a $69 million termination fee if the deal failed, further sweetening the offer. The board's caution was swept aside by the scale of JetBlue's bid and the pressure from shareholders eager for a quick return. This decision set off a chain reaction. By picking JetBlue, Spirit put itself squarely in the sights of federal regulators, who argued that eliminating a major budget carrier would hurt price-sensitive travelers. The shareholder vote didn't just choose a buyer. It locked Spirit into a path where the fate of the airline would be decided not by the market, but by the courts. The escape route looked golden, but the risk was baked in from the very start. On January 16, 2024, a federal judge issued a permanent injunction against the merger between JetBlue and Spirit. The courtroom ruling, delivered in a dense 109-page opinion, cited antitrust law and the risk of erasing a vital low-cost competitor from the market. The Department of Justice trial team argued that Spirit's very presence forced larger airlines to keep fares in check, especially for travelers who relied on the lowest possible prices. By blocking the deal, regulators intended to preserve competition. The decision, however, carried consequences that stretched far beyond legal theory. Within minutes of the injunction, Spirit stock opened at $2.46, down sharply from the previous close of $4.79. Panic selling swept through Wall Street. By the end of the day, Spirit shares closed at $2.26, a 53% collapse on record volume. The $3.8 billion lifeline from JetBlue vanished instantly, replaced by a $69 million consolation fee, far too little to plug the growing financial hole. Analysts issued a flurry of downgrades, warning of a liquidity crisis and the evaporation of any near-term rescue. The market shock was immediate, but the aftershocks were even more severe. Spirit's market value was cut in half overnight, wiping out hundreds of millions in shareholder equity. Major investors, pension funds, mutual funds, and hedge funds faced losses with no hope of a rebound. The company's own SEC filings warned that the lost merger synergies would have a material adverse impact, with projected cost savings of $600 million per year now out of reach. Regulators saw the ruling as a victory for consumers. Yet for Spirit, the injunction eliminated its only viable escape route. With the merger blocked, the airline was left exposed to mounting debts, rising costs, and an unforgiving market. The clock started ticking on Spirit's independence, and there would be no second chance. As the dust settled, the company faced a new reality: no partner, no safety net, and no margin for error. On July 10, 2023, Pratt & Whitney engineers faced a problem that began so small it was invisible to the naked eye. Deep inside the PW1100G geared turbofan engines, a microscopic flaw had formed during the manufacturing of powdered metal used for critical turbine discs. This contamination, embedded in the metal's structure, introduced weak points that could crack under the relentless stress of flight. The flaw was not a one-off error. It affected turbine discs produced from late 2015 through mid-2021, meaning thousands of engines worldwide were at risk. For airlines like Spirit, which relied heavily on these engines to power their A320neo and A321neo fleets, the implications were immediate and severe. The science behind the crisis is precise and unforgiving. As the turbine spins at tens of thousands of revolutions per minute, even the tiniest imperfection can become a deadly liability. Over time, the contaminated metal develops micro cracks. Under repeated thermal and mechanical stress, those cracks grow, threatening to split the disc apart. The risk is not hypothetical. An uncontained failure in this part of the engine could be catastrophic. Pratt & Whitney's response required a complete teardown of every affected engine. The process begins with removing the engine from the wing and shipping it to a specialized maintenance facility. There, technicians disassemble the engine down to its core, extracting the high-pressure turbine discs for thorough inspection. Non-destructive testing using ultrasound and advanced imaging hunts for cracks invisible to the human eye. If any sign of weakness is found, the disc is scrapped and replaced. Even if the part passes inspection, the engine must be painstakingly reassembled, tested, and certified before it can return to service. This is not a quick process. Each inspection can sideline an engine for 300 days or more, with some units out of service for over a year. For Spirit, every grounded engine meant a jet sitting idle, unable to generate revenue but still accumulating costs. The flaw's microscopic origins triggered a chain reaction that reached every corner of the airline's operation. What began in a powder metal plant in upstate New York now dictated the fate of an entire fleet. Spirit's operations team faced a daily puzzle with no solution. At any given moment, nearly 40 aircraft sat idle, grounded for months at a time as engines cycled through inspection and repair. The numbers were relentless. Out of every 5 new generation jets, one was parked, unable to carry a single passenger or earn a dime. For a carrier built on high utilization and thin margins, this was a slow bleed that couldn't be staunched. Each GTF engine required a teardown that stretched past 300 days, sometimes keeping a jet out of service for more than a year. The grounded planes lined up at storage facilities, their bright yellow tails a visible sign of lost capacity. But the real pain ran deeper. Every missing aircraft meant hundreds of empty seats per day, routes trimmed or abandoned, and schedules rewritten week after week. Spirit's planners tried to shuffle what was left, but the math was unforgiving. With 38 aircraft grounded out of a fleet of just under 200, the airline's seat supply shrank by 20% at the height of the crisis. This wasn't just a technical inconvenience, it was a direct assault on Spirit's business model. The airline's entire strategy depended on flying each jet as much as possible, spreading fixed costs thin across thousands of seats and dozens of daily departures. When utilization dropped, the costs stayed put, but the revenue vanished. Even as planes sat idle, lease payments, insurance, and maintenance costs continued to pile up. The operational drain quickly became a financial hemorrhage. Spirit's network map began to contract. Cities that once saw daily flights were dropped from the schedule. Popular leisure routes disappeared. Travelers who once relied on Spirit's ultra-low fares found fewer options or none at all. Meanwhile, competitors filled the gap, snapping up airport slots and capturing price-sensitive customers. The simultaneous grounding of so many aircraft didn't just shrink Spirit's footprint. It fed directly into the mounting losses that would soon show up on the balance sheet. For Spirit's operations planners, every day brought the same calculation. Too many planes on the ground, too few in the air, and no clear way out. Spirit's financial unraveling played out in plain sight, but the arithmetic behind it was brutal and relentless. Over 4 years, the airline lost $2.5 billion. In 2024 alone, the red ink deepened to $1.2 billion, an amount that would wipe out most mid-sized companies in a single year. By the summer of 2025, losses for the year were already projected to exceed $800 million. Debt piled higher, reaching more than $8 billion. Even after the first bankruptcy had erased nearly $800 million through debt for equity swaps and brought in $350 million in new capital. Credit analysts watching Spirit's filings saw a balance sheet stretched past its breaking point. The airline's monthly cash burn hovered between $67 and $83 million, draining reserves faster than any relief could arrive. Even the annual compensation from Pratt & Whitney, ranging from $150 to $195 million, barely covered a fraction of the losses. In 2024, that payout represented just 12 to 16% of the net loss, leaving a massive shortfall every quarter. The second bankruptcy brought a one-time settlement of $140 million, but it was little more than a bandage on a hemorrhage. By August 2025, Spirit's liquidity had run dangerously thin. The company drew down the last of its $275 million revolving credit line just to keep credit card processors on side, temporarily boosting cash to around $550 million. But with obligations mounting and revenue from grounded jets evaporating, that cushion vanished in weeks. Fitch Ratings slashed Spirit's credit to CCC-, warning that default was now a matter of when, not if. For creditors, the math was clear. The first bankruptcy had failed to solve the underlying problem. Cash was running out, debt was unpayable. And the engine crisis showed no sign of easing. In the world of restructuring, this was the classic Chapter 22. A company forced back into court because the first rescue plan was never built to withstand a second shock. The only option left was to start cutting deeper, and that meant shrinking the fleet fast. Spirit's restructuring plan moved from financial triage to a physical reckoning with its fleet. Facing a cash drain it could not plug, the airline filed motions in bankruptcy court to reject leases on 87 aircraft, nearly 40% of its entire fleet. Lessors, from major global firms to regional leasing shops, received formal notices that Spirit would no longer pay for planes it could not keep in the air. The logic was brutal but clear. Every grounded jet still demanded a monthly lease payment, insurance, and basic maintenance, even as it generated zero revenue. For the most modern A321neos, a single lease ran $350,000 per month. For engines alone, the cost soared to $200,000 per month, per GTF power plant, with dozens of jets idled by the Pratt and Whitney Defect. The math made no sense. Survival was the priority. By late summer 2025, 85 A320neo family aircraft had been ferried to storage lots across the southwest and the desert airfields of California. Rows of 6-year-old jets, still gleaming under their yellow paint, now sat stripped of engines and avionics. The paradox was stark. The engines, plagued by a manufacturing flaw, were still worth more than the airframes themselves. Maintenance, repair, and overhaul brokers scoured the stored fleet for salvageable parts. Some engines were leased out to competitors desperate for spares, while other planes were cannibalized outright, their components keeping the remaining Spirit fleet barely operational. Value had inverted. The physical contraction of Spirit's network was no longer an abstraction on a spreadsheet. Each rejected lease meant another city lost service, another crew grounded, another route abandoned to rivals. Lessors scrambled to remarket the returned jets, but with hundreds of GTF-powered aircraft grounded worldwide, demand evaporated. The shrinking fleet signaled to the market and to competitors that Spirit's era of aggressive growth was over. The company had entered a new phase, one defined by survival, not expansion. Delta, United, and Southwest moved quickly as Spirit's network began to shrink. Delta, with its authorized Pratt and Whitney maintenance facility, found itself in a unique position to profit from the very defect that crippled Spirit. While Spirit's A320neos sat idle, Delta's Tech Ops division took in a surge of engine overhaul work, generating new streams of revenue. At the same time, Delta and United rolled out basic economy fares, capturing travelers who once relied on Spirit's ultra-low prices. These legacy carriers, already dominant in major hubs, now absorbed the demand from routes Spirit could no longer serve. Southwest, operating an all-Boeing fleet with CFM LEAP engines, faced minimal disruption from the engine crisis. Only 4% of its jets were grounded at the height of the Pratt and Whitney recall, compared to nearly 30% for Spirit. This allowed Southwest to expand into markets Spirit abandoned, offering stable schedules and consistent service while Spirit's reliability faltered. Frontier, Spirit's former merger suitor, also picked up slack where it could, but it lacked the scale to fill every gap left behind. The competitive landscape shifted almost overnight. Cities like Denver, once a Spirit stronghold, lost all service. In total, 11 cities disappeared from Spirit's route map, and the airline's network capacity fell by a quarter. Each cut route meant fewer choices for travelers and more pricing power for the remaining carriers. As competitors filled the void, Spirit's ultra-low cost promise faded from the market, replaced by higher fares and reduced options for price-sensitive flyers. Industry analysts began to question whether Spirit could survive at all. With 2 bankruptcies in less than a year and a shrinking presence in key markets, the odds of making it through 2026 dropped to just 60%. The fallout extended beyond one airline. The same regulatory decision that was supposed to protect consumers now left them with fewer choices, and a marketplace where the biggest carriers grew even stronger. Today, Spirit's grounded jets echo across an industry where one microscopic flaw can erase billions and eliminate consumer choice. As engine inspections stretch into 2026, travelers face fewer options and rising fares. The collapse is not just corporate failure, it is a warning. In aviation, a single overlooked detail can ripple out and reshape the entire market. Where will the next fault line appear? Share your thoughts below.